Professor.
All right. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Glad to see everybody here. Please take note, I am recording this session. My name is Chinyere Ebwe. I've been teaching at Megavas College for many years, 30-something years now, I think about 35 years. And this class is designed especially as a liberal arts pathways college options course. It's called The War on Drugs. Okay. And so I welcome everybody. It's a very interesting class. I welcome all of you who have decided to participate in it. Today, I'm just going to introduce the class, how we're going to conduct it, and also try to clarify some concepts. And I will do this every week. I'm going to really make it my business to clarify, things. So I'm going to talk about the very basic, in a very basic way today. I will talk about module 1 and then also clarify concepts in module 2, which I posted today. So first of all, the class is going to be conducted 100% online, as you all know already. And there will be no formal lectures as such, but I will come in and provide these office hour lectures, and I'll use the opportunity to also address the way that the homework assignments need to be addressed. What has happened in the past is students will not read the readings. And then when I ask questions, they rush to the internet and try to get some answers, which do not reference what were assigned for you to read. Very often, what you get on the internet does not address the question. And I'll provide an example when we come to talk about the questions for module 2. Okay, about ideas. So somebody left and coming back. Okay, so first of all, the class will consist of my lectures, which I say I will give every week, and then also, hello. The consist of these lectures and the readings. Very much you should do the readings in order to be able to answer the questions. And then there will be discussion forums which you should participate in. And those discussion forums are intended to get you to also read what has been assigned and then to be able to participate in a meaningful way in the exchange of discussions. You must respond to the question and also comment on the responses of at least 2 other students to get full credit. If you do not comment on at least 2 other students, you will get a maximum of 35 points out of 100, which you don't want to do. But you also need to respond correctly to the questions. And I'm going to share the screen at some point so as to show you what I mean by this. Okay. There will be one final exam, and it is going to be written, no multiple choice questions in this class, and they're going to make direct reference to what you have been reading throughout the semester. Okay, and then there will be a final paper, and it's not like a research project as such. In a way, it is. But I'm not asking you to make any particular argument or to write a thesis. What I'm asking you to do is what is called an annotated bibliography. What it means, though, is that you're going to pick a topic, and that topic has to be a very narrow topic. and try to find some literature on it and read at least 7 articles. Generally, I mean, 7 is enough. Read at least 7 articles. I might extend it to 10 in the future, but for now, 7 articles. And this is the process. So that process, in spite of explanation, many students still don't get it. Okay, this is the process. You summarize each article in half a page or 1 page. Generally, 1 page is enough. So that gives you a good 7 pages on the project. Okay, summarize each article in 1 page. Now, before you summarize the article, you must provide the bibliographical citing of the article. And then you summarize it in a page. What is the article saying? In what way is it connected to the war on drugs? Now, after you summarize all 7 articles in 7 separate pages, you then provide what is called an integrative summary. An integrative summary is one that ties all the 7 articles to one thesis statement. Okay, and I'll give you an example of a thesis statement. You can say that the methods by which the drug cartels in South America operate is about the same. Okay, so how is it about the same? Which aspect of their operations of the cartel is about the same? And so you do get some readings on the Medellin cartel, on the Cali cartel, on Escobar, and who have you, the different drug lords. And you can focus on the way they bribe officials. You can focus on the way they process. You can focus on the way they smuggle the illicit drugs across borders. You can just, focus on one aspect of it. And then you read articles that are focused on examples of this particular kind of operation, say the bribery, say their murderous methods, killing people, you can do that. You can even actually compare their kind of bribery to, say, the bribery on the Opium War, which we will talk about later. But your topic has to be narrow. Don't just pick a topic like the war on drugs in the United States. I wouldn't accept it. That is too broad. But you can think about the gang warfare over drug territories in American neighborhoods. And so you can pick Los Angeles, and New York, and Chicago, and then compare them and come up with some kind of a common thesis, a common theme, a common idea that makes them similar, that makes them different, and write about it. That's what we need to do here. Okay, so that final paper is due at the end of the summer. I think we've chosen July 10 or July 11. This is 2 or 3 days before the end of first summer session. That is what you're going to do. Okay. All right. So having said that, does anybody have any questions on the process? Any questions? Okay, raise your hand. Or you can just
we'll be selecting the articles from the library, correct?
Yeah, select articles, preferably journal articles. I mean, you can select magazine articles, say from Newsweek, Business Week, you can do that. Journal articles are preferable, but if you select, good documentary from, say, Business Week or Newsweek or even New Yorker, what have you, that would be fine with me. I mean, you can take things from the internet. There are good documentaries that you can get on the internet these days. And
No, I was talking about from the mech library, like JSTOR.
oh,
And,
absolutely, absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
That's from
just use.
JSTOR. Yeah,
Okay.
that's where you have the journal articles. That's where you have journal articles. Okay, now let's talk about the course itself. This is a course called War on Drugs, but we're going to focus. Yes.
Good evening, excuse me. I have a question.
Sure.
Regarding the do we have two assignments due today, the forum and another, or it's only the forum?
Yes. For this first week, we have 2 assignments per module. But in subsequent weeks, I will have either a discussion or an assignment. Okay. This is summer. In the regular semester.
So we have both.
Yeah, in a regular semester, you have both every week. But for this, just for this week alone, you're going to have a discussion and a homework assignment. In subsequent, from next week on, it's going to be either a homework assignment or a discussion. That's the way I arrange it for the summer. Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. So this is a course on the war on drugs. And when we say war on drugs, it's the declaration against the use, production, and distribution of illicit drugs that are considered to be illicit, controlled substances that are forbidden. Okay. When you talk about drugs in that sense, many things are drugs that are out there that, in the sense, first of all, they're addictive. They could also be psychoactive. Psychoactive drugs are those drugs that alter people's minds and behaviors. For example, alcohol is a psychoactive drug. Beer is an alcohol. Whiskey, dry gin, rum, liquor, even wines are psychoactive substances. But, they are not forbidden, okay, but they are controlled, okay? For example, if you're a minor, you're not allowed to buy beer, okay? But then there's also addictive substances like tobacco is an addictive substance. It's also controlled, okay? But it is not psychoactive, all right? So in the sense that it does not alter people's minds. Coffee is also an addictive substance. And that way you can actually call it a drug, but it is not psychoactive. It does not alter people's minds and behaviors, and does not lead people to do crazy things. And so the emphasis in this class will be on psychoactive drugs. But again, like I said, not all psychoactives are forbidden. So we're going to focus on only 2, even though forbidden substances are not limited to only 2. For example, you have cocaine, you have opium, which will be the focus of this class. But you have things like amphetamines and other addictive, mind-altering drugs that people use that are forbidden. You cannot use them for any reason at all. Marijuana, for example, have been forbidden for decades, only now to be legalized. But even then, you can just go around producing and selling marijuana anyhow. Still some kind of control. But marijuana is a mind-altering drug that also leads people to misbehave or to change their behaviors and sometimes misbehave. Okay, so but we're going to focus only on 2. Okay, that is opium and cocaine, just as an illustration of the war on drugs over the years. So that would be our focus. Now, the war on drugs is when you talk about America, has been there for many years. For example, in the 1920s, there was a prohibition against alcohol, that is liquor, not so much against beer, but against liquor, whiskey, gins, and rum, and they were forbidden. Okay, and that was what was called prohibition. And in 1933, the prohibition was lifted because people just violated it, and it was just making a lot of profit for those who violated the law. And so it was lifted, but then controlled by the government. Now, but even over the centuries, there has been, from time to time, prohibitions against the use of addictive substances. For example, way back in England, not long after Columbus discovered America, because tobacco is not something that has been grown around the world, forever. Tobacco actually came to Europe from America when the Europeans discovered America, and they began to export tobacco to Europe. And King James passed a law against, King James of England passed a law against the use of tobacco, saying it was poisonous to the lungs, it smelled foul, and what have you. And after a while, they lifted the prohibition. Now, but even going back, back to the ancient world, something like opium was used, because opium is not a recent thing. Opium was used way back in ancient world. I'm talking about ancient Egypt. It's more than 3,000 years ago, or 2,000 years ago. Opium was being used, and it was a regular crop. It's a painkiller. As you know, opium has is a poppy, and then you kind of like harvest the sap from it. You kind of like, if you scratch it, it will come up with some kind of a sap. And so that was harvested and processed, dried, and people in the ancient world used it as a painkiller. And as you know, the biological name for opium is Papaver somniferum. Papaver somniferum simply means a poppy that makes people sleep. Okay, from the Latin word somno, somnare, and somnare in Latin simply means to sleep. Okay, and so somniferum is something that makes people sleep, and somni, of course, is the sleep, and ferum is the Latin expression for causing or doing something. Okay, so in the ancient world, it was very well known, and also it was also recognized to be addictive. Even at that time, and ancient physicians recommended rather that it should be used sparingly because it could become addictive, it could become dependent on it. Nevertheless, it has been used throughout the centuries as a painkiller way back, and several people used it for time, for different purposes, and it was also used as anesthesia. It was also used as anesthesia way back, not only in the ancient world, but also in the Middle Ages and the early modern Europe. For example, the Battle of Agincourt, which King Henry of England, King Henry V of England, had fought against France. Opium paste was used as an anesthesia to conduct surgery in the battlefield. And up to today, we also use an extract of opium for making anesthesia. So it's nothing new, okay? In the same way, cocaine has also been used throughout history, not in the Western world, not in our side of the world, but in the Americas. The ancient people of the Americas used the coca leaf. And we're going to talk about the development of that coca leaf over time. So we're going to focus on these two. And it says that our thesis is, first of all, that the war on drugs is not a new thing. Okay, it's not a new thing, but it has taken different forms over time as people recognize not only their value, and very often medicinal value, but also it has had religious value. The ancient Incas in the Americas used coca leaf for religious purposes. Okay, and you know, something that alters people's minds and make them see spirits. Very often in the ancient world was seen as very, very valuable. Many of you are not old enough to have witnessed the Andy Griffith show, where NTB went to the church and they told him they were going to see visions and spirits and what have you, only to find out that the pastor had given them some very strong alcoholic drinks. And so when they drank it, they became, spiritually excited, when in fact they were drunk, period. They were tipsy and nothing but that. And so you can think about what the ancient Incas did with the coca leaf. But we will also get to that. Now, the whole idea then is that if you now fast forward, and there were developments in England also about the war on drugs in the 19th century, and we'll talk about that as we go. But the war on drugs that we'll talk about in the United States began actually in 1971, when Richard Nixon, the president of America at that time, declared a war on drugs. And because it was, the use of illicit drugs, cocaine and opium and heroin, which is a derivative of opium, was beginning to create social problems. And so Nixon declared a war on drugs, okay? A formal war on drugs. But like I said, the war on drugs has been there. Okay? And the United States is not alone declaring a war on drugs. Now, the question is how different countries have encountered this war, what gave rise to it, and how they have managed the process over time will be the topic of our conversation. Now, in thinking then about how different countries have managed the war on drugs, we'll then talk about what is in Module 2, which is in what way, what has shaped the minds of policymakers in fighting the war on drugs? What is it that has shaped their minds? What is it that makes them think about how to approach the problem? Because the war on drugs really, is a war that has been there, but it has not been winnable. The question then is, if the war is not winnable, should you not continue with it? Okay, and it's a question that maybe we all can talk about in an exchange. Because the war is not winnable, is this something that should be abandoned? Some people have said that the war on drugs is a waste of resources, and that if you lift the prohibition on the use of cocaine and opium, that the huge profits that are made by those who engage in that war will no longer be there. Now, and so all the money that is spent on prosecuting the war on drugs could be saved. Is that true? Now, we need to think about it the other way. If you think about the fact that people, overdose on drugs, and people take drugs, they misbehave, and they create family problems. Some people won't go to work because they are on drugs. People do crazy things. They are driving, they're going to drive crazy. They come back home, they fight with their families. And since these drugs, I don't care if you deregulate them and the prices fall, which is what is going to happen. If you deregulate price, if you deregulate the use of drugs, opium, cocaine, what do you call that thing? Marijuana. If you deregulate them so that you no longer arrest people for distribution, or you no longer arrest people for possession, what's going to happen? What's going to happen really is that the prices will fall drastically, because the cost of distribution will fall drastically. The cost of protecting or trying to hide from the authorities will no longer be there. And so the price is going to fall. But what happens in economic theory, which some of you have learned, is that when the supply increases, the supply curve will shift to the right, just basic economic theory, and equilibrium price is going to fall. And when equilibrium price falls, what happens? The equilibrium quantity supplied and demanded will also increase. Now, how will that affect the community and the society? Well, if people take more drugs, especially the psychoactive drugs, what will happen is there'll be more absenteeism on the job. People are going to maybe overdose and end up putting a strain on the medical facilities. They're going to put a strain on family, and some people are going to just go on a binge. And I say this because of the way people use drugs. Why do people use these psychoactive drugs? Yeah, pretty much you can explain that, why people use psychoactive drugs, just from the way people drink. And, you have people who are alcoholic, okay? Well, psychoactive drugs, people use them essentially, not essentially, some people use them because they enjoy the high, okay? They just enjoy the high. That's why they use them. And it feels good, for some people to be high. I don't drink personally. I don't smoke. And so, I don't get engaged in those things for the sake of enjoying to be high, okay? Some people enjoy it, and I can see why they enjoy it. I've never been, somebody that will be drinking just for the sake of the enjoyment, but I have experienced high from drinking. But the last time I drank to be high, or not to be high, but I experienced a high, I was 16 years old. That was many, many, many years ago. So you can think about more than 50 years ago. And what happened was there was a wedding, and I was happy, and I was happy-go-lucky, and I had a lot of drink, and I passed out, and I didn't know that I passed out. And so I missed some goodies that were given to everybody. And so I woke up the next morning and said, where's my own share of those goodies? And somebody said, well, we gave you your own share of the goodies. And you said, take it out of my face. And I didn't even know, how I ended up home. I just woke up the next morning in my house, in our house, back home, Nigeria. And I said, hey, wait a minute. What happened to the wedding? Is it over? And so from that day, I said to myself, I would never again drink. Period, because I did not want what happened. So the last time I had a beer, a glass of beer, was in 1973. So you can do the math, okay? It's actually 50 years ago that I had my last glass of beer. So that will give you an idea of, why I had stayed away from drinking anything. Nevertheless, the kind of high that I had, and some people drink for that purpose. People drink to enjoy the feeling of euphoria. Some people drink because they have problems, and drinking is a way they can forget their problems for a minute. Okay, and so if you deregulate illicit drugs like marijuana and cocaine and opium, some people will essentially go on a binge because it's going to be cheaper. And so now the question then becomes, what other kinds of strain is it going to put on the system? It's going to put on the medical system, it's going to put on the family system, it's going to put on even people are going to commit crimes, and crimes might actually increase because when a lot more people get high and then they don't know what they're doing and they're going to injure people, which is going to also put a strain on law enforcement and the judiciary system. So there are balances, and this is why you would not want to say, well, let's deregulate drugs because all the profits going to the drug dealers will go away, but they'll still make profit anyway. They'll still make profit if you increase the supply. That is, the prices fall and the quantity demanded, and supplied increases. You will increase their profits. This is simply true. It might mean that the profits will be distributed across new dealers, because new people are not going to come in since there is no law prohibiting them from dealing the drugs. New dealers will come in. More people will share in the profits, but the people that are experienced in it will make more profit. So the war on drugs is not exactly winnable as such, okay? But there are complications in any approach that you take. And so you need to think about that when you say deregulate drugs, okay? Or when you say, well, the war is unwinnable and therefore you should not engage in it. Now, it could also come down to a choice. Which problems do you want to deal with? Do you want to deal with the issues that arise from law enforcement and the gang warfare and the murder, or do you want to deal with the social system that will be impacted negatively from the use of drugs? So it depends on your perspective. So now we're going to look at 3 ideological perspectives, which is in chapter 2 of the book. That 3 ideological perspectives, and they call them analytical perspectives, but essentially they are ideological. Okay, you can call them philosophical perspectives on the war on drugs and how to deal with it. And those ideological perspectives or those analytical perspectives will also shape the way people want to deal with drug users and also the enforcement of the war on drugs. So I'm going to begin with 3. I'm going to identify the 3 major perspectives. One, according to your book, is the deviance perspective. Like I said, people take drugs for different reasons, okay? Sometimes just for the enjoyment of it, just like people drink beer or drink wine and enjoy it for the taste of it, okay? I once asked a friend of mine who, was a smoker. He smoked cigarettes. And I said, why do you smoke this thing? Because I don't see anything good coming out of it. He said, because it tastes good. I said, oh, cigarettes taste good. Well, excuse me. So people drink. If you drink wine, I used to sip a little bit of wine, or even I have tasted whiskey, a couple of times, and I can see why people enjoy it. Okay, and so people, take those things because of the enjoyment, right? And they take them in moderation. Okay, a lot of people drink, and they drink in moderation. They drink, they don't get drunk, they can still drive and do whatever. But the point of the matter is that when people take psychoactive drugs like cocaine and opium, which can really, create behavioral problems and also financial problems for individuals, the deviance theory takes an approach, okay? And the deviance theory is, comes out of what we call a classical way of thinking, okay? It's like what they call political realism of power. Okay? So now the deviance theory takes the approach that every society, every community, every group has norms of behavior. That is, behaviors that are considered normal and acceptable. And so the approach of the deviance perspective is that drugs are bad. Drugs should not be used because they lead to misbehavior. And so those who take drugs contrary to the social perspective, to the social prescription, that nobody should engage in taking these drugs, including alcohol. There are not normal ways of behavior. There are acceptable norms of behavior. And those who engage in behaviors that are forbidden are deviants. So if they are deviants and they engage, say, in the use of drugs, and you find out that you can demonstrate that they're using these drugs, which is contrary to social prescription, then that approach, that way of thinking is going to also influence the way they want to deal with a drug user or a drug dealer or a drug distributor or a drug producer, which is to punish them. So they take the approach that people who deviate from the prescription should be punished. And that punishment will differ depending on the stage at which they participate, whether it is in the stage of production or in the stage of distribution or in the stage of use, that's consumption. So you take the approach that they should be punished, and they should be punished severely. And so that is what the deviance approach prescribes. Okay, then there is the liberal approach. Okay, liberalism is based on what is called rational behavior. And what is rational behavior? Rational behavior is a behavior that is consistent with a desired outcome. That's what rationality is. Now, I listened to the news sometime in the past, and somebody had jumped from a 12-story building in the Bronx head first, and then they smashed into the ground and died. And they were interviewing people in the neighborhood and said, this guy, do you know him? Do you see what he did? And somebody says, yes, I know him, and what he did was totally irrational. And I'm saying, no, what he did was not irrational at all. What the person that jumped did was not irrational. He wanted to die because he had given up on life and therefore wanted to die. And therefore, for him to jump from a 12-story building head first was quite rational, because that behavior was consistent with his desired objective, to die, in order to solve his problems. Because come to think about it, death is the perfect solution to all our problems. It is. Because a dead person does not have any more need. That even if they die and they rot on the surface of the earth, that becomes a problem for the living. Because if they don't want to take the smell of the rotten body, it is in their interest to go and bury the body. And so, but the dead person doesn't care anymore. So the liberal approach is based on what we call rationality. Rationality, posits that people do things that are consistent with their objective. And so those who take drugs are taking them for a purpose. They could be taking them, like I say, for the enjoyment of it, because it gives them a high, whether it's alcohol, opium, or cocaine, or amphetamines, methamphetamines. They take them for the enjoyment of it. Okay. Some people take drugs because they want to get away, get temporary solutions to their problem because they forget their problems for the time being, okay? And they resolve their issues for the time being in the sense they forget them. Not that they solve them, but they help them to forget for a while, okay? So the rational concept is that people do things for a particular purpose. And, so the approach then would be what? The approach of the rational theory is to educate. For example, if you drink alcohol for the enjoyment of it, if you take cocaine for the enjoyment of it, if you take opium for the enjoyment of it, their approach will be to say, first of all, if you're taking cocaine for the enjoyment of it, it could harm you. If you're taking alcohol for the enjoyment of it, it could harm you, but take it in moderation. But do not take cocaine at all because it may have long-term consequences that will be more damaging to you. So if that's your way of getting high, do not get high like that. So rational theorists will say educate rather than to punish. Rational theorists, if you think about the South American farmer who engages in the production of cocaine, or the Afghan person who engages in the production of opium, rationality simply says they are doing it because it's a way of making money. And so you might offer them alternative crops so that they'd stay away from the production of cocaine and opium or those active drugs. And so rational theory would rather propose to educate, to provide alternatives. Now, the third analytical perspective, the third philosophical perspective would be the Marxist, the historical materialism, okay? Of course, Marxism, Marxism actually is a philosophical explanation of the world, according to Karl Marx, the philosopher and economist. So we call it Marxism, but it's really about historical materialism. Historical materialism essentially is an explanation of the history of the human race, which simply says that over time systems are established, and those systems create the exploited, the working class, according to Karl Marx, and the exploiters, which is the aristocracy that exploit the working class. And over time, there have been struggles. And the struggles, are the result of points in time when the exploitation pushes the working class to the extreme. And so, and that system continues to exist. That system has been there, but in the process of struggle, what happens is that the struggle leads to what you may call, what in common language you can call a compromise, or in Marxist rhetoric, what you call a synthesis. Okay, that's a synthesis of the old and the new, and so you have a new system. For example, there was a time in the ancient world, and Americans were not the people that started slavery. Way back in the ancient world, you see it in the Bible, you see it in history books, where there was actually what was called primitive exploitation, where people exploited others. And then there were struggles, and in Europe, what it led to was what you call serfdom, okay? Where you went from outright exploitation by slavery to the feudal system, where you had serfs and landlords. And then from then you began to have the Industrial Revolution and what we have today. But still, Marxists will insist that the capitalist class in the modern world is exploiting the working class. Okay, but what historical materialism simply is saying that there's always the exploited and the exploiters at every stage in society in different forms. Okay, the exploitation might be subtle, but it is still there. So, and what has happened then is that exploited are alienated from the system of production and distribution. And it is that alienation that has, gives rise to people using drugs like cocaine and opium in order to get away from their problems. And at every stage along the way, and as we will be discussing, you will see that the drug use has been there as a means of resolving some of the frustrations of the working class. Okay, this is what Marxists would explain. And so drugs are used as a means of temporarily, resolving the frustrations of the working class. And if you can, and what Marxists then predict, or their own prognostication, which is their own forecast. That's what the prognostication is. Their own forecast, their own prediction is that this continuous exploitation of the working class by the capitalist class or the aristocratic class is that there'll be a revolution where you completely do away with the capitalist class. And once you have that revolution, and once you do away with the exploiting class, that the working class will no longer be alienated, and they will identify with the system of production and distribution and be part and parcel of it in equal terms across the board. Then people will no longer feel alienated, and they will not be using drugs. Whether that is going to ever happen, I don't know. And I'm not prescribing that it happens one way or another, okay? But this is what the Marxist explanation would be. Once you can overthrow the capitalist class, the exploiting class, that the use of drugs will cease. I don't know if that's ever happened in the ancient world, when in fact exploitation was much more brutal and even accepted. And so, when you respond to questions on homework assignments, please do not go to the internet and just copy and paste something. Try to make reference to concepts. Like I asked this question about, like we just described the different analytical perspectives. Try to put your answers in the context of the analytical perspectives. Let me see if I can share something with you. So just give me a minute. Okay, let me share a screen with you. Okay, you see my screen? Hello?
Yes, yes, we can say it.
Okay. So you see, like this discussion here, this discussion question ideas, which is going to be your next discussion. So summarize the Marxist theory and psychology of addiction. There are two things here, okay? First of all, what is the Marxist theory? I need to see that. And then the psychology of addiction. So how does the Marxist theory explain the psychology of addiction? And then the next thing is to compare the Marxist theory with the realistic theory, okay? Realism, that is the perspective of the deviance is based on realism. And realism is explained in your reading. So I need for you to explain what realistic theory is and what realism is, okay? So don't just like go on the internet and come up with something. What's realism, okay? Now, realism essentially is an explanation of power relationships. That's what realism is about. It's an explanation of power relationships, which is to say that if in a relationship between two people, between two communities, between two constituencies, there is that perpetual struggle for domination. That's a perpetual struggle for domination. And generally, the struggle for domination always leads to a zero-sum game. Your gain is my loss, and my gain is your loss. Which, again, what do you call it? Liberals don't agree with. Liberals believe that cooperation could lead to greater output, and everybody have like a win-win situation. And that might also make a lot of sense, okay? And so in trying to answer this kind of question, you need to refer to what is said in the text, and the text makes very, very clear the implications of these perspectives in life, okay? So the deviance theory, you know, is based on the realistic theory of power. Yeah. Now, which do you agree with applies to the American society? Okay, and so you must make reference to say some examples of what you think. For example, you have the working class, you have low-income people, and you can also look at the different approaches to discipline when people take drugs, the different approaches to wealthy people, to celebrities, and also the approach towards the working class and the ordinary people in the community. Are there, you know, different approaches? And if so, can you tie those different approaches to Marxist theory or to realism? That is the nature of power relationships, okay? And so that's an example of how to approach that question, okay? Rather than just pulling something out of the internet, with Google these days, you can always come up with something. So I need to see that in your discussion when I'm looking through your discussions, okay? So in that way, I've covered essentially the first two modules. This time next week, I might actually propose another office hour, say on Tuesday, so we can talk about the modules that will be posted on Monday and Tuesday. You know, so it's really something I'm going to consider. But definitely this time next week, we're going to also talk about the other topics, and I'm going to make sure that I prepare myself for them. So I just gave you an illustration of how to respond to questions, and so that you can do well in this class. Having said that, I'm going to close this session and ask if you have any questions for me. Okay, hearing none, I thank you for coming. And so I'll see you guys next week, Thursday. I might do something earlier than next week, Thursday. All right?
Thank you, Professor. You have a good day. Everybody, good night.
All right, good night all.
Hey, Professor, are the readings posted now?
I'm going to post, yes, I'm going to make an announcement for every meeting, yes.
Are the readings posted for the second discussion question now?
Yes, they're already posted, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I put up an announcement today.
Okay, thank you.
All right, have a nice evening.